it wasn't all that long ago that all the drowns in the world united under one strong leader. And that leader was the King Drowned. And so this is the story. It all began on one stormy night only a few thousand years ago, when the Drowned, who was just swimming around in the vast open oceans looking for some gold in ravines, when suddenly he saw a beacon of blue light in the distance. And this beam of light was so bright that the nearby ocean was suddenly illuminated in the light blue hue. It was very strange, and this was nothing like what had ever happened before in this Drowned's entire life. And so this Drowned, seeing as his gold quest was almost a complete failure, decided to investigate this strange blue light, thinking that it could possibly be a new source of wealth. And so he began swimming towards it. But when he arrived right to where this beam had originated from, the beam just disappeared. And so the Drowned was left in the dark, with so many questions about what just happened, such as where had that beam gone and what even was it? But at the same time, there were no clues to answer any of those questions, and so he assumed that that beam must have just been some sort of tricks his brain was playing on him, and so he just decided to go back looking for gold, when all of a sudden a giant glowing purple book fell out of the sky and landed right next to him. The Drowned was now very confused, as where had this book come from, and was it related to that beam? He didn't know, and so he swam towards the book, hoping for answers. And then he touched it, when he suddenly began to have a vision, as he could see himself in third person, and then a voice.
Well, well, well. You're the first worthy being that has actually come forth to the light. So we guess that you must be the one destined to hear the ancient prophecies. So here we go. According to the billion-year-old legends, one day there will be a brave and strong Drowned who will rise above the rest, and he will unite all the other underwater undead, and together they will create the greatest civilization ever known to this world. All the undead within that civilization will then live great, prosperous lives because of that leader that saved them, and so all the undead will adore him because of that. However, the surface dwellers, well, they'll hate him, and they will attempt to end this grand civilization. But that shouldn't be too much of an issue, as that brave Drowned should be able to stop the aggressors using the trident of the gods. Because once that leader has united all of the Drowned together, he will become a god of the ocean. And so with that, he should be able to harness the power of the ocean at will. And so he should be able to rise the ocean, if he so desires to kill off the entire surface dwellers civilization. And so that's why he would also be worthy of such great weapons, such as the trident of the gods. But the leader of that civilization will grow old, even though they become immortal, and so they will eventually have to pass reign of this world onto another. But that other being cannot be a Drowned. It has to be, well, the legends say it must be a wolf, but there's no more elaboration on that. And so we're here to make you an offer. Would you like to become that leader of the Drowned, the one that rises above the rest and unites them all? Well, I'll give you a few minutes to decide. Come back to me and you can begin.
The Drowned was shocked to hear all of this, as he had never heard of any legends like this, especially not for the Drowned. And so he began thinking that this must be some sort of mistake, as there's just no way that the Drowned would be worthy of having such a grand civilization. But at the same time, what if the book was telling the truth? What if it was possible for the Drowned to create their own massive civilization? And so he was thinking, if he agreed to this, he could improve the lives of millions of Drowns. And so thinking that, he impulsively decided to accept this offer. And instantly, the book disappeared, and the Drowned began feeling a tingling sensation as the broken parts of his clothes were suddenly being stitched together somehow, and it was suddenly regaining its original colour. And so now that Drowned was wearing a very nice black and blue suit. But was that it? Well, no. As when he looked around, he saw a glowing trident fell from the sky nearby. That must be the trident of the gods, just as the legends had said, and so he swam over to that as well and picked it up. But when he did, strange things began to happen to him, as surges of power suddenly began flowing through his bloodstream, and his heart had somehow turned to diamond, meaning he was now immortal, and he suddenly just felt powerful, more so than he had ever felt before. He felt like a god. And so, over the next few hours, he would experiment on himself and the trident to find out what these new powers he felt he had gained actually were. Well, after a few hours, he discovered that he could travel the ocean very quickly using the trident's riptiding ability, and he learned that he could summon lightning with it as well. This was all very impressive, as no drowned in history could have done all of this. And the best part of all of this was that there was probably much more to discover as well. But for now, this was enough. He had to begin that unification, just as the legends had told him he would. And so, using his riptiding ability that he had just learned, he zipped through the ocean and went to the nearest group of drowns he could find. And he told them everything. And all these drowns, well, they all thought that he was some sort of con man showing them magic tricks to try and steal their gold. But he was no con man. He was the leader from that prophecies. But these drowned didn't care. They all thought that he was lying. But then when one drowned went to punch him in the face to get him to leave, they suddenly saw everything that drowned had experienced. And so it was at that moment that drowned understood and believed their leader and became a loyal follower. This all happened so quickly that all the other drowns nearby were very confused, as why had their friend turned so quickly against this con man? But seeing that made them question themselves, as maybe he wasn't a con man, maybe he was telling the truth. And so they all went up to him, and they had the same visions as well. And so because of that, they all agreed to be loyal followers as well. And so once that entire group of drowned was in agreement that this suited drowned was telling the truth and he will make them a grand civilization, they knew they had to share the news to everyone. Now, the suited drowned was shocked to see that they were so eager to share, but he just ran with it and told them to just go and spread the news to everyone and to tell them to return right here in 5 days. And that's when they can begin building this great civilization. And so fast forward a few days, and the suited drowned was just returning to that point. And well, he might have slightly underestimated how many drowned would be willing to join his civilization so quickly, as there were probably a few million drowned just standing there, waiting for orders from him. But he didn't have a plan for this many drowned. He was only expecting a few thousand, and so he was just standing there thinking about it, as all the other drowned stared at him in anticipation, when he came up with an idea.
We will build the greatest city ever known to drownkind, as every single block will be handpicked from only the most luxurious minds. And so, let's begin.
Now, that might have sounded very nice in theory, having all these luxurious blocks and the grand city design, but how is he going to do all of that? Well, his plan was to split all the drowns into 3 groups. One group would gather all the materials, one group would plan the city design, and the third group would actually be building the city. And he would command all 3 on what needed to be done. And well, despite all the struggles, it was a success, as he was truly a great leader that everyone looked up to and obeyed. And so because of that, in just a few years, the greatest underwater city ever known was built. And so after the construction of this magical city was completed, the drowns could finally start living the luxurious lives that they were promised for all this work. And well, they did, without any issues, as over the next few decades, life flourished for all the drowns as they lived happy and peaceful lives within this giant underwater city. And so because of all of that, the drowns loved their leader, so much so in fact that they began to call him their king. But you can't just be a king without having a crown. And so many of the drowned gathered up as much gold as they could from their own personal supplies and created a luxurious crown for their amazing king, which officially made him the King Drowned. And then after that, to further show their appreciation towards the King Drowned, the Drowned built a giant underwater palace right in the centre of their city, dedicated to the King Drowned, and that's where he would live. And so fast forward another few thousand years, and life continued to be great for the Drowned, as the city continued expanding, and their luxurious lives, well, they only continued to improve, as they now even had conduits in their city as well, meaning that they now had the ability to grow all sorts of new crops in their city, which meant a much greater variety of food. And so everything was just great. But all of that would change on one summer morning, as it was on that morning that the King Drowned, whilst in his palace, further practicing the trident, trying to improve his skills, that a group of villager fishermen somehow found the underwater city. And so the Drowned ran into the King's Drowned palace and asked him what they needed to do. And well, he responded by saying,
"Do not let any of them escape with their lives, as if they leave, they will tell our greatest enemies, the Guardians, where we are, and they will attack and kill us all. So, go forth and kill those villagers, now."
And so the Drowned launched their attack on these fishermen, as some used their fishing rods to sink their boats, others tried using their tridents to impale the villagers to death, and some even tried punching them to kill them. And so it was within just a matter of minutes that all the fishermen were all killed, and the threat of the Guardians ever finding their city was gone. And so with that over, the Drowns went back to their normal lives, quickly forgetting that had happened. However, little did they realise that when they went back up to the surface to fight those villagers, the one fisherman began to sail away, and he did so quickly that he was able to escape to safety. And it would take a few more days beyond that point, but he would eventually make it back to his village, where he would tell the story to everyone how
we got lost at Storm, and by the time it was all over, we were tens of thousands of blocks away, right in the middle of the vast open ocean. And we were trying to get back to safety when we found it. A giant underwater city. It was magical. It's something that we could never build, not even in 1,000 years. And it was inhabited by those pathetic Drowns. But they spotted us, and they killed every one of us, except me. Because I got away somehow, probably because of luck. But still, we need to go back and take this city, as if they can live in these luxurious cities, there must be something there that can help us advance our own civilizations greatly.
all the villagers were very fascinated, and they knew that this villager was telling the truth, as none of the villager fishermen would ever lie about anything, especially not when all of their friends had just been killed. This must be true. And so because of that, over the next few weeks, legends would spread of this magical city all across the world, and they began to name it Atlantis. And so many fleets of villagers began embarking on the quest to find this city of Atlantis in the ocean. Now at first, the king drowned and his people had no idea of this search, but very quickly they began to realise, as over the next few years they had several attacks from many different villages, and it just didn't make sense, as there was no reason for there to be this many attacks on their city, as the villagers weren't really ocean-bearing civilizations. They must have been trying to look for something, and whatever it is, it must be very important, as they've been using many materials to build all these boats and have invested a lot of time into all of this. And so the king drowned went aboard one of the many ships that had sunk that tried getting into their city to investigate their navigation maps to see what they were looking for. But what he ended up seeing, well, it was just horrifying, as he read all these different descriptions about their city and books all over the place on how the villagers were planning on taking over their city. This was all wrong. How did they know about this city? It was meant to be hidden. No one else has survived after seeing it. And so the king drowned ran back into the city and informed everyone of this terrifying news. And well, all the drowns immediately erupted into chaos, as if the villagers knew where their city was, then it's likely the Guardians would soon find out. And if they did, well, they would all be killed. And so everyone was just starting to run around, trying to pick up as much as they could before trying to flee the city. But quickly, the king drowned, calmed everyone down by announcing his plan to fix all this.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move this entire city millions of blocks away, and then I'm going to create secret white portals made from the magical calcite that can teleport us all across the world. This way, we can still move the city around and no one will find us, which will mean no unnecessary attacks, but we should still be able to access all parts of the world. Also, I shall make sure that there are always storms going above the magical calcite portals, so that way very few sailors should go in those areas, and thus no one should ever find these portals, and thus no one will make it to our cities. We will be safe.
And so quickly, everyone calmed down, as they knew that the king drowned was going to fix this. And so they all stood there, watching the king drowned, as he casted this spell, using his godly trident. And so it took a few minutes, but once the spell was completed, the city had been moved millions of blocks away, and was now hundreds of thousands of blocks away from the nearest civilizations. This was good. And so over the next 100,000 years, their city continued to grow and flourish, with life getting better and better for all the drowns. Meanwhile, back on the surface, over that same time period, the legends of this city of Atlantis would eventually fade into obscurity, and many soon believed that it never even existed. But again, all of that would change on one morning. As it was on that morning that the drowned king was just reading a book about dark magic spells in his library, when one of the rooms in his palace began to glow. More specifically, it was the room where he saw the book with the prophecies from all that time ago. And so he went to go into that room to pick up this book to see why it was glowing. But as he picked it up, it just disintegrated in his hands. And all that was remaining was just a treasure map. That was strange, very strange. And so he looked at the treasure map. And when he did, he saw that the cross for the treasure began to glow. And on the face of it was a wolf. That was not normal, and so he ordered one of his most loyal drowns to go and investigate and find out what was on that X. And so that drowned left the city, going towards that X that his king had ordered him to do. But little did the king know, ordering that drown to do that, well, it would begin the decline of their civilization. But to learn about that, you'll need to watch this video.